In this lesson, we are going to learn about OpenAI API. This is one of the core concepts you need to understand to build AI models. So we're going to come here to platform.openai.com, and I recommend you guys read about whatever interests you here. But we will go to Playground. So we can see that we have some options to the right. So we have chat, complete, and edit are legacy. You're not going to be using those. We're only going to be using mode chat. And then we have some models. So by reading the documentation, you will figure out that these 0613 are the latest models. So we have GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 Turbo. I have noticed minimal to no difference between GPT 3.5 and GPT-4. A lot of people will tell you that GPT-4 is a lot better. For me, it's not. I just, in programming, in text analysis, in anything, I just haven't noticed too much difference between 3.5 Turbo and 4. I just haven't noticed any difference, or almost any difference. Now, I may be wrong, and GPT-4 may be better, but I would argue that it's about how you use your language model. I would argue that I'm actually very skilled in using GPT, so I can use 3.5 to the same extent as some people can use 4, for example. That's why I haven't noticed any difference, because I can use them very well. Temperature is basically randomness. If you are solving like a mathematical task with GPT, you should put temperature back to 0, so it's more deterministic and less random output. But if you are writing a poem, you should put temperature to like 2, so it's more random, more creative output. But I would actually say that you should always keep it at 1. There is just no need. I think it's going to perform worse at like 2 or 0. You should just keep it at 1. I always keep it at 1. Maximum length is the number of generated tokens. So for example, if you say 256, each token is about 4 letters. So it's about 1,000 letters maximum. So when GPT is responding, it's going to respond with the maximum amount of 256 tokens. But it will respond with less tokens if it decides to. This is just the hard maximum limit. And then stop sequence, stop P, frequency penalty, presence penalty, don't touch them. You can read the documentation, but I never touch them. Just don't touch them. It's not something a beginner should be concerned about, and even I never use them after 3-4 years of using GPT. So we can see that we have a few fields here. So we have a system field, user field, and then we can add new messages. So system is basically the most powerful message. You can say you are a programming coach. It's going to look at this message the most. And then there are other two types of messages besides system, user and assistant. If I can say, for example, explain arrays in Python, and I don't need this other message, so I'm going to remove it. I'm just going to submit. It's going to return the generation explaining arrays in Python. Basically, you want to use user when the human is inputting messages, and assistant when AI is responding. But it doesn't matter. Like if I change this to user, it won't change anything. The AI will know how to respond anyways. But now, how do we put this into programming? How do we call this remotely from our application? So I'm going to click here API references, and then after it loads, I'm going to click here on chat, and I'm going to say create chat completion. So this is how we call this chat completion from our code. As you can see, we're going to import OS, import OpenAI, then we're going to set the OpenAI API key. So you can get your keys by going to view API keys here. And here you can create a new API key, call it whatever you want, and this is your API key that you will be using. So we can say openai.chatCompletion.create. So this will create a chat completion, and then we're going to pass in some parameters in these brackets. So model is going to be GPT 3.5 Turbo. You can write literally any of these models. And then we pass in messages object, or actually the array of messages. So the array of messages has message objects inside of it. So each message object has key role and key content. So key role is going to have either system, assistant, or user. And everything else will be an error. And then content is the content of the message. So basically this would mean that we have two messages. System message, that's you are a helpful assistant, and then user, that's saying hello. When we make this API call, we are going to get the result into this completion variable. So this is what that variable will look like. This is the result of our, or response of our call. We have ID, object, created, model, etc. So first, we want to actually access this choices key. So we're going to say completion.choices. And as you can see, this choices is an array of multiple objects. And so we want to access the first object, and the first object has index 0. And then inside of that first object that we access, we want to access the key messages. And then we're going to print messages. Now, we don't want to just print messages object. We also want to access the content key. So we print, so if we also add here .content, it's going to actually print this message. Hello there, how may I assist you today? So if you haven't understood that, basically we have a completion object, and then we dig down to this message. So first we're going to say, inside of completion, we have multiple keys. We're going to choose choice. Inside of choice, this is an array. We're going to choose the first object, and then we're going to dig down to messages, and then we're going to dig down to content. And when we print this, it's going to print this message content. If this is too complex to you, I recommend you just copy this and copy this into ChatGPT and ask it to explain. Ask it any questions you need. ChatGPT is going to explain this so well. Why do we put 0 here? Why do I put .choices? Everything you want to ask ChatGPT. You're going to understand everything. And now let's copy this into our app. So we will go back and we will start a new terminal. And we will conda activate tutorial, the same environment that we have. And we will pip install OpenAI. And now we're going to make a few changes. So we will import OpenAI. Then we will say OpenAI.API key, and then print your API key. Your API key can be found here in platform.openai.com/account/API keys. We're going to create a new one, as I explained. Then this will be the same, but we will change on message a bit. It's going to be similar to this here. So we will say completion is equal to OpenAI.chatCompletion.create, and we will choose the model. Now I recommend actually choosing -0613. This is the newest model, as I showed in the playground. And then we have array of messages. Each message is an object. Role system content, you are a helpful assistant. And then role user content message. So this message, this is a variable that user inputs. So we will just, as you can see, I will show you what this does. If we go here and then I say, welcome, how may I assist you today? This is our welcome message. And then on message, if I say, what is 2 + 2? This is the user message that I sent. So this is the message on message, this is the message that we will receive in this function. And we will just send this to GPT-3, GPT 3.5. And then it's going to give us some response to that message. It's going to store it into completion. And then we will send the message. And the content will be completion.choices, 0th element, message content. And then we're going to send. I explained why we do this in the previous clip. So the content was the sum of 2 and 2 is 4. You can actually play around with this to understand it more. So if you remove this content.content, let's see what's going to happen. If I go here and say, what is 2 + 2? It's going to print this object, role assistant content. So it's going to print this message object we got to here. And then if I say .content, it's just going to print this value of this key content, for example.